Thanks for joining us on another busy night of all things people, power, and politics. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. Another day of political violence rocking our country. And it's something that every single American must condemn. Conservative activist Charlie Kirk shot and killed at an event in Utah. And it's far from the only incident that's happened this year. Tonight on The Pulse, we're talking with Genesee County Sheriff and gubernatorial candidate Chris Swanson and three other members of our community highly regarded, including one who knew Charlie Kirk and even invited him to a college campus in Michigan to do a rally similar to the one he was at today when he lost his life. Tonight, how we can start to turn that temperature down in our great country. And that is where we begin tonight. The 31-year-old Kirk was shot hosting an event in Utah for college students when he was gunned down. President Trump announcing his death on his Truth Social page. We'll get to what he said in just a moment. But right now, we want to break down what we know right now. The shooting happened at an event at Utah Valley University, which is, by the way, just south of Salt Lake City. Moments before the shooting, Kirk was taking questions from an audience member about mass shootings and gun violence. There was one gunshot, and Kirk immediately reached up as blood started pouring out of his body. It was caught on video, but obviously we aren't going to show you that, as it is extremely traumatic and very disrespectful to the family members, and quite frankly is unnecessary to see. The suspect in custody, according to the FBI director. But we should note the person taken into custody right away after the shooting was not the gunman. One of the people in the audience was former Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz. He described what he saw on Fox News earlier this afternoon.
Can't say I saw him get shot, but as soon as that shot went out, he fell back into his left, and everybody hit the deck. A lot of people started screaming, and then everybody started running, as you might expect. There was some police presence, but there was no security check going in, which didn't happen. Charlie has some security in front of him, but you got the sense that the shot came kind of straight at him.
President Trump ordering flags to half staff until Sunday. He paid tribute to Kirk on Truth Social, saying this: the great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me. And now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you, from the president earlier today. Now, that shooting happened just minutes after a separate shooting in suburban Denver, Colorado. Two teenagers critically hurt in a shooting at a high school. The gunman also shot and critically hurt. It's not clear tonight what led up to the shooting or how the suspect was shot, but police do not believe any officers fired a shot. Investigators believe that gunman is a student at the school. We do know the shooting happened on school grounds, but what isn't clear is if it happened in the building itself. The Sheriff's Department who responded is the same agency that responded to the Columbine massacre back in 1999. There's no easy way to transition out of stories like those, but we do need to tell you about some other developing news overseas, because Polish and NATO forces took down multiple Russian drones that crossed into Polish territory. European leaders immediately condemning that attack, but the Kremlin says it didn't deliberately attack Poland, blaming it on Ukraine, jamming their navigational signals. It came as Russia sent a barrage of strikes to Ukraine, prompting fears the war could spill over.
To Putin, I mean, my message is clear. Stop the war in Ukraine. Stop the escalating war, which he is now basically mounting on innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure. Stop violating allied airspace. And know that we stand ready, that we are vigilant, and that we will defend every inch of NATO territory.
Polish airspace has been violated several times since Russia invaded Ukraine 3 years ago, but it hasn't been to this extent. Nothing close. It's not immediately clear how many drones were involved. And that is just scratching the surface of the day's news. So let's pick up the pace and run through some of the other big stories happening right now, starting at our nation's highest court, where justices will hear a case involving President Trump's tariffs. Arguments will happen in November, which sounds like a ways away, but it's actually super quick by the Supreme Court's usual standards. They'll rule shortly after that. A lower court found most of them are illegal, saying it didn't have the power to impose them under an emergency powers law. The ruling left them in place. The Trump administration asked justices to rule quickly, saying striking them down would put the country, quote, on the brink of economic catastrophe. President Trump's emergency order in the nation's capital is about to expire. That order federalized D.C.'s police force and sent a surge of law enforcement into the city. You'll remember that. We've been talking about it every night here. It'll expire overnight tonight because Congress didn't extend it. But a House committee is debating 13 bills that would basically take even more control away from the city if approved. The National Guard and some other federal agencies will stay deployed. It's not clear tonight when that could actually end. And the Trump administration is appealing a ruling blocking him from firing Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. The president fired her over allegations that she committed mortgage fraud. Cook sued to block the firing and denies those allegations. The court ruled President Trump's removal power is limited to actions taken during a time in office. The case could end up before the Supreme Court. The conservative majority has allowed him to fire board members of other independent agencies, but has suggested that power is limited when it comes to the Federal Reserve. Well, we're turning back to the killing of Charlie Kirk after the break. Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson on how these events are approached from a law enforcement perspective and how he would plan to turn down the political temperature if he's elected governor. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics on a busy night of news. Joining us now, as we have with so many of the candidates who are running for office here in the state of Michigan, joining us now, the Sheriff of Genesee County, Chris Swanson. And Sheriff Swanson is running for governor of the great state of Michigan. And we thank you for joining us here tonight on The Pulse.
Thank you. A great state it is.
Well, you know, and I want to ask you about all of that in just a moment. But as someone who's in law enforcement and as someone who follows, obviously, the political divide in this country, for a moment, your reflection on what we saw happen today with Charlie Kirk being killed in the middle of a political rally.
Assassinated.
Yeah.
I saw the video on Twitter, and when I saw how fast his life turned from doing what he does, regardless if you agree or not, to leaving a wife and 2 kids that fast, the immediate reaction is political violence in this country has no place. That is beyond divisive, and when you see that this is starting to become a pattern, it shakes the conscience of the people in this country.
How do you run for office in this atmosphere as a Democrat when you have, you know, folks like Mayor Mike Duggan who basically said, I don't even want to be identified as a Democrat after the Kamala Harris-Joe Biden years, and I'm going to be an independent because I don't want to get into the infighting. As a Democrat who's running, how do you kind of take this on?
Well, I got a little behind the scenes look last year when I spoke at the DNC, and I was able to work with the Harris staff and the White House even. And there's a reason why we have a 27% favorability around the country, because the messaging is what is the issue. And everywhere I go, I have to battle that because we need to rebrand and show that we are a party for people. We are a party that does the protect, serve, and unify, which is my motto. But I'm not ashamed or afraid of being a Democrat because this is a time to change the narrative. That's why we campaign. And so I think the ability as a Democratic governor to have a 30% crossover in Genesee County from the Republicans, to have an independent appeal, I'm in the right spot.
Every candidate that we have who runs for governor, we don't script our questions.
Right.
We ask questions that are pertinent to you and to any other candidate who's here. And for you as a law enforcement official, when you hear the Democratic message, hearing from many cities now, crime isn't as big of a problem. The crime is down. What you're feeling isn't right. Is that the dissonance that doesn't serve Democrats?
100%, because Democrats, and I saw this in 2020 during the George Floyd protests when, you know, we in Flint decided to take a different path and they were going to riot and we stopped it, and that moment reached the world. We talked about it off camera. But as I was going through my interviews as days followed with multiple protests, that's the first time I heard defund the police. And I remember going into an interview and one of my staff says, hey, they're going to ask you about this. And I thought, what does that mean? That makes no sense. And then the more I saw that this actually was a minority group of people saying this it became the majority message. And so as Democrats, we are law and order, and no party owns law and order. Everybody wants safe cities and communities. And so when you hear this message, somebody from law enforcement like me, as an elected sheriff, as a Democrat, that's exactly why I'm doing it.
But when you hear President Trump say the same thing, which is, look, we had in Chicago 74 people shot in 4 weeks, 8 people at least that we know of died, I think more after that. He's saying that's unacceptable. And so his suggestion is to move the National Guard into Chicago. If you become the governor of Michigan and something happens in one of your cities where the president calls and says, we're sending the National Guard in, what do you tell the president?
Well, first of all, there is an order that he can do that, but I wouldn't agree with it. You know, in Michigan, we have Title 10, Title 32. There's 10,500 Air National Guardsmen and women that serve every day. These are people that are working a job on a Friday. They're being deployed on a Saturday. They're the ones that we need to thank and appreciate their service. But if they get an order from the commander-in-chief, then they're following the orders. So the first thing is I would not make them the focus. I would make sure that the president said, and I would make it clear that that is not the answer to crime. I've been in the business 33 years. Law enforcement is the best profession to handle it. Every community has crime. Law enforcement's job is to prevent it and react to it. And when you look at the National Guard coming in, the long-term sustainability is not there. There's 300 cities in America that have 100,000 or plus people, and when you bring in the National Guard, it sends a message. That's not the message that we need to send.
Governor Pritzker in Illinois is essentially saying, I'm afraid to call the president even to have a conversation because I'm afraid the call alone will be a suggestion that I made the call to ask for help and enact Title 32. Yeah. What do you do in that sticky situation if you're the governor?
So that's where relationships come in, and that's why executive leadership is so vital to the state. Somebody from law enforcement that understands how to protect and serve and how to be in chaos and find order out of it, not just a walk, but even in a city like Genesee County and Flint, we deal with this. You've been up there for your start of your career. We have struggles like anybody else does, and there's not a statement out there that says that crime is not an issue. Everybody out there has been at least impacted one way or another, so you have to understand the reality of it.
So accepting that reality and saying it out loud, right?
Well, and I've said that. Yeah, crime is an issue. One person assaulted or murder is too much for a community. We don't judge. You know, a lot of times we say, you know, we reduce crime by 23%. Well, that's great. We've done that in Flint. We reduced murder by 40%, but there's still people getting killed. That's why law enforcement is there. That's why we do things that are preventative, and we solve problems before they become the actual narrative of that community. That's why law enforcement and executive leadership is so key, not the military.
In the minute and a half we have left, I want to ask you about what you do in a situation where you have an impasse between Democrats and Republicans in your legislature, where you have budgets that are on the line. You're the governor of the state of Michigan, let's say. What do you do to get these two sides together to agree on something?
You may have to meet 3 days in a row with nonstop and have conversations to say, where's the middle ground? Because to have a state shut down is not the option. These are things that have to be forecasted before it becomes a problem like we're at right now. Every minute that ticks by, the people in the state of Michigan are going to pay for it. And so, therefore, those relationships, regardless of what the House and Senate is in 2027, they have to be relationships for the people. And that's where a governor comes in.
30 seconds left. What skills do you have as a sheriff that you think translate so expressly to become the governor of a state?
I solve problems. Whatever the problem is, whether it's chaos, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's relationships, my whole life has been taking people who have a divisive situation and making order out of it. I think people looking for the energy, they look for leadership, and they look for somebody who could bring order out of chaos.
Sheriff Swanson, it's good to see you running for governor here in the state of Michigan. We thank you for your time again, and we'll be talking more. And if should we decide to do a debate, we hope you'll be a part of it.
Indeed.
Thank you, Sheriff. We're going to keep this conversation going after the break. Democratic State Representative Kelly Breen, former Republican lawmaker Rocky Ruchkowski, and Chris Mathrani, who knew Charlie Kirk, are in Studio C next. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Back now on The Pulse, looking at all things people, power, and politics. Here to talk about the shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk and how we can all turn down the temperature in our political discourse. Democratic State Representative Kelly Breen, former Republican State House Majority Leader Rocky Ruchkowski, and Chris Mathrani, who's the MIGOP Youth Chair and actually knew Charlie Kirk. And we thank you all for being with us here tonight. This, as I said at the beginning of the broadcast, if there is any place where people are doing anything but condemning this, then they're not invited on this program, nor are they invited into this discourse, because any political violence is an attack on all Americans. And so we, of course, think about Kirk's family and everyone who knew him, including the people at this desk. I want to begin with you, Chris. You actually knew him well enough that you invited him to Michigan State University, where he did a similar rally that we saw him do today. How would you frame how this is being taken within the circles and with young people, because he was a leader in so many ways with young thought leaders in the conservative world.
Well, it's certainly very saddening, and it's also very surprising. This was not expected, and it's also caused a lot of anger to be built. But what I am telling everyone is to take a step back, whether Democrat or Republican, and look at where our country's at right now. We are so divided, at which the person who was leading the charge for open discourse and civil discourse was just killed while doing just that. And that shows where our country's at right now, and how divided we are, to the point where when someone who is so God-oriented, family-oriented, and country-oriented is being murdered while just trying to have open conversations and non-restrictive conversations.
What do you remember about Charlie Kirk from a personal angle that the people at home would be interested in?
So, it's very known that these conversations are open to the public, but what isn't shared is he does not have these conversations prepared. He goes to the mic without having any notes, having any, anything memorized or prepared, and he's able to share his points so clearly, and no matter what the topic comes up, he has something prepared, and he shoots it straight and is very clear on his stances. And that has not changed. That has not changed since he has started in politics. I'm
going to the Democrat at the table only because as we talk about condemning this, it's so critically important. We want to talk to Rocky, who also has met Charlie Kirk on a couple of occasions as well. Times, yeah. Representative, I wanted to ask you, we've seen this movie before, unfortunately, with sadly other people killed. We know that the gunman who shot 2 Democratic lawmakers on June 14th in Minnesota, the wife, who was a lawmaker, died. Her husband died. 2 others injured. It wasn't but, April 13th that Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro was with his family when this house was set on fire. Where are we in this country? And as a Democrat, what do you think you can tell everyone on the other side of the camera about lowering that temperature?
Well, I think it's important to understand where people are coming from. And I have to say right off the bat, we were in the chamber when we got the news about Charlie Kirk. And I hopped on Twitter because I felt the need to immediately condemn this violence. And I don't think there's a single soul in our chamber that disagreed with that. Everybody is condemning political violence. And we have to understand that across the board, we all essentially want the same things, and we disagree on how to get there. But what we are seeing now, though, is instead of toning the temperature down, what I saw immediately after was the temperature escalate, because somebody posted a picture of 2 of my colleagues claiming that they were sitting down and being disrespectful when there was a prayer being said for Charlie Kirk. Whether you pray or not, or whatever God you might pray to, that chamber was silent and it was solemn. And as a result of somebody's misinterpretation of a situation, my colleagues are now getting death threats.
And that's sadly where we are, and that should not be where we are. Rocky Rachkowski, you've always come on this program debating with Democrats fiercely when you disagree with how they believe this country should move forward. But you have always left here, I've seen you in the parking lot, hugging, shaking hands with, talking to those who even you vehemently disagree with. Why have we lost that in larger circles?
I don't think a lot of us have lost that. Let me just take a step back before I answer your question and say, tonight or tomorrow night, there's going to be 2 young girls that are going to say, when is Daddy coming home? And he won't come home. And I feel that more than ever because I got phone calls from friends that are Republicans, but that served with me in the war, and we've lost friends in the war. And it's tough when you see a young person, especially someone of Charlie's age, die. Mental illness does not have a political party. What Kelly said, actually, I agree with. We are 2 political parties, and we vehemently work for what we believe is best for our children and our families. It's just we disagree on how to get there. But I will rest it on you tonight, Roop, and the news media that's out there tonight. When you ask about the tenor or the venom that's out there, I will say that it's the news media and it's our TV, radio, cable that likes to sensationalize those arguments between the political parties. I'm sorry, Roop, I'm not going to say that it's a Democrat-Republican issue, because, yeah, we like to tear the heck out of each other,
Absolutely.
but we also like to talk to each other civilly. It's the sensationalization of this and the dealing with mental health.
Listen,
it's time we deal with that today.
You are absolutely correct, and there's one reason we do this show, and one reason alone. We want to have a smart conversation with everybody invited to the table, and we've done that each and every day since we launched the show last July.
And I appreciate you doing that.
And we're going to continue to do that. Listen, when there was an attempt on President Trump's life, not just on the golf course, but also while he was at that rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, we were on the air saying this should not and never will be condoned. And that is something that, look, I will tell you, the national media, so many others out there, anyone who wants to take advantage of moments like this, shame on them, and something needs to be done. Social media also has a responsibility in this. Krish, as a young person, I want to bring this to you. Online radicalization on the Democrat and the Republican side creates an atmosphere where lone wolves go out and do what they think they should be doing. How bad is it online, and what can we do to lower the temperature there, Krish?
It is horrible, and what causes these types of attacks has to do with the rhetoric. When we label the President of the United States, comparing him to Adolf Hitler, when we call Republicans as domestic terrorists, call Republicans as neo-Nazis, this is the type of rhetoric you're going to expect, and these are the type of actions that their supporters are going to pull. We need to make sure that regardless of our political ideologies, we all bleed red blood regardless of what we believe. And we need to make sure that we show that regardless of our path to helping our great nation, we are all trying to work together to help our country and to unite regardless of what, how we get there.
There's a friend of my wife, Julie, and I's who's on social media, who, after seeing some of the posts that Representative Breen's talking about, how ridiculous some of the people who are on there, the loud minority gets the biggest seat at the table on social media. And the decent people of this country perhaps can put their phones away and not fuel the continued vitriolic attacks that you see on social media. Because I'll tell you one thing right now, we've had social media experts on here, and I want you to ask you about this, Representative, who've told us that the way big tech makes money is off you fighting with your neighbor on your phone.
That's right.
That's a problem, isn't it?
It is a problem. I will say in the last 2 years, I personally have taken a step away from social media for my own mental health. I will go on my personal page and I'll make fun of my kids, but I try to limit some of my exposure. I will post something and then I'll get out because it's terrible.
Yeah.
Twitter is frankly a cesspool.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be that way.
And we can all do better, and we can all vow to do that right now.
Absolutely.
Listen, each and every one of you didn't have as much time as you usually do on this program, but what you said was powerful, it was important, it was indelible, and we hope that every single person who watches on the other side of that camera takes away one thing. We all have a personal responsibility. We hope you do your part tonight when you pick up your phone. Rocky, Krish, Representative, thank you for joining us on The Pulse tonight. That is The Pulse for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Roop Raj. As always, it was good to be with you. Wishing you all peace.